I'm Elliot Chodoff, and welcome to Conflict Uncovered, your go-to podcast for in-depth analysis on the complex and dynamic conflicts shaping the Middle East, Israel, and the world. Join us as we delve into the latest developments, historical contexts, and the geopolitical forces at play. We bring you the insights you need to understand the issues that matter most. Stay informed, stay engaged, and uncover the truths behind the headlines. Hi and welcome. It's January 21st, the day after Inauguration Day, mid-morning here in Israel, and I'm joined by my good friend and colleague, Yisrael Ne'eman, director of the Ne'eman Academy, and pertinent in particular for our discussion today, author of Hamas Jihad. Since we'll be talking about Hamas and Jihad, it seems like a good background to start with. Yesterday, Donald Trump was inaugurated for the second time, and shortly before that, we have a ceasefire agreement with Hamas, a return of 3 hostages, and peace in our time. Trump, of course, touts himself as the great deal maker. He's got his eyes on a Nobel Peace Prize, who knows, maybe a few others, physics, literature. The sky's the limit. But what I want to talk to Yisrael about today is the idea of making deals with characters of jihadi organizations in particular and Hamas specifically in particular. Before I turn to Yisrael, I want to just interject something about what's been going on terminologically, and it's germane to our discussion. Everybody talks about the ceasefire leading to the end of the war, and some even say the end of the conflict. And I'm particularly annoyed, since it's my field, when people misuse terminology. At best, a ceasefire is a ceasefire, and the war, which didn't start on October 7th, isn't going to end when the last hostage is returned, if that ever happens. War is something grander than the current round of fighting, and conflict is even grander than the war. So ending the war means getting both sides to agree to give up violence, and ending the conflict is getting both sides to agree that they have no more claims against each other. So there's something very grandiose in that terminology. But I want to bring it back down into the idea of a deal. Do we have a deal with Hamas? What does it mean to have a deal with Hamas and its type of an organization? And with that, I'm going to hand it over to Yisrael. I know you're also a great deal maker, so tell us about the deal and where it's going to take us.
Okay, so first of all, you never make deals with jihadis. You and I have had this discussion ad nauseum, okay? And you can go from whenever you want to start in recent times, from the Iranian 79 and all the way onwards. Every time you quote make a deal, they're never going to keep their side of the deal. And they write about it explicitly that you don't keep your side of the bargain when you're dealing with people who are not you, okay? In other words, the Christians, Jews, what's called the dhimmi groups, right? That they are supposed to capture the world. So that's one. There is no such a thing as a deal with jihadis. There only could be defeat of jihadis. And as I've said, you have to degrade, destroy, and discredit. Okay, we've gone over this a few times. Secondly, there can be an exchange. And that's what's happening with the hostages for terrorists. Okay, that's what's happening here. It's a terrible exchange, but it's the only game in town that we really have, unless we pursue this onwards. And everybody's done the calculations. It's been decided this is the way to do it. And Trump, of course, very much behind this, as was the Biden administration. Okay, now looking forward, if you want to end the war, as you made very clear, that means that both sides have to agree that the violence is over. I do not believe that the jihadis agree that the violence is over. In other words, they have to be completely out of Gaza, defeated also in the West Bank, Judea, and Samaria. And then we can get to ending the conflict, as you so pertinently put out. with no more claims, which is going to be a lot tougher. Okay, so we're at the
Yisrael, let me interject the question here.
Yeah.
How do we know that they don't believe that violence is the way? After all, they took a tremendous beating since October 7th. The destruction in Gaza, the destruction done to their organization specifically, but also to Gaza in general, the punishment they've taken, their leaders killed. What makes you think that they aren't sitting down and saying, you know what, that really didn't work all that well?
Okay, so I look at it like this. First of all, the average person going back to his non-existent house in northern Gaza, let me interject here all that stuff about an ethnic cleansing because we were there clearing the area does not exist because they're going back. Okay, that's a side comment here. When someone sees that destruction, they quite possibly think twice or even three times. My question comes up more with the leadership and their managing to draft new recruits. And we know how impressionable 17, 18-year-old young men are. And that they could start, you could have a startup all over again. But it does depend on the leadership because leaderless, herds don't really go very far. They can make a mess, but they're not going to be effective. And therefore, the leadership cadre has to be eliminated. They are not going to give up. This is theology. They will just say, okay, it didn't work this time. We'll go for it next time. And in the history of jihad over 1,400 years, we know that each time there's a restart. We have to make sure there is no restart. And that's an absolute.
So how do you prevent it if you can't convince them and if you can't punish them? And granted, at the moment, we've apparently reduced their main leadership in Gaza to 3 people,
Right.
Mohammed Sinwar and a couple of so-called brigade commanders in Rafiah and Khan Yunis. But we've taken out leadership before. We've been taking out leadership since Sheikh Ahmed Yassin and Abdelaziz Rantisi and a whole long list along the way. How come it hasn't worked up until now?
Okay, so here's my take on it. First of all, they need to be removed, either killed or expelled. Okay, the whole whatever leadership cadre is there. And second stage, you must replace it with someone. I had this discussion the other day here in the house about who is your cat loyal to? Whoever feeds you. Okay, there has to be whoever's giving the supplies, right? That organization is the one that you'll find the average person will start having more loyalties to, even if in the back of their minds they would say, look, I really would have liked to have defeated the Jews. And by the way, they don't really talk about us as Israelis. They call us the Jews, right? And they have to be replaced by someone who those who are credible and carry a big stick. That being said, we have to be very, very careful all the way. And Israel has to make sure that we have power over the security apparatus, or at least a very big input there. That anytime any jihadi raises their heads, it's eliminated. Okay? And therefore, there has to be a carrot and stick by an organization that is totally against this jihad idea. It's a tall order, but there are no shortcuts.
It seems to me there's a paradox, and I hear what you're saying, and I think in theory that it's a very good idea, but it would seem to me, given the history, especially what happened in 2006, 2007, the expulsion of Fatah and the PA by Hamas after it won the elections there, that the only way to rule instead of Hamas without eliminating all of them, and we clearly haven't done that, and I don't think that that's really a possibility, is that is to eliminate every last member of Hamas. That they've managed to recruit apparently thousands to fill their ranks. Now, obviously, not on the same combat quality as the ones we took out since October 7th. But here I want to bring another sort of quality in, and not so much combat effectiveness as sheer brutality. Hamas, and we've seen this in its behavior with Palestinians in Gaza. And let's remember that Yahya Sinwar spent his
Yeah.
time in prison in Israel for killing Palestinians, not for killing Jews. He was an equal opportunity murderer. So the level of brutality of Hamas is very, very high, and that's not theory. That's been displayed in practice. And I want to emphasize not just on October 7th against Israelis, but against Palestinians. It would seem to me that the only way for another organization to maintain control, and I want to emphasize maintain, because gaining control, you send them in, okay, here we are, we've taken control. But to maintain it is by being more brutal than Hamas. And now you're caught on the horns of a dilemma, because what you're actually trying to do is supplant Hamas with an even more brutal organization that will be able to maintain control there.
Okay. You got a very good point. I would like to go back to U.S. Forces after World War II. And
Okay.
Here, we know that they did not stand for any Nazis or Imperial Japanese starting to challenge them. And
Correct.
I think if you're going to look at it in brutality direction, I would move it away from, of course, the civilian population, like who intimidates them more, and that's who they'll be with, but directly go after, and you have to be credible. If someone gets intimidated, right, the population, and they know who it is from Hamas, they have to trust that new organization enough to know, I'll give you the name, and that individual will be taken care of. Exactly.
Right.
Okay. And if you want to talk about using their brutality, look, it's not a matter of torturing, okay, because that says something about the person doing it, but that they will be incarcerated, they will be chased down to a rat hole wherever they are, and everybody knows it. That if you are Hamas, you will find yourself in jail. Okay, you will find yourself being interrogated, and that is the end of it. But it has to be credible, and that means all this wishy-washy, mealy-mouthed stuff that comes out of, call it the liberal democratic understanding, and it could go for people who are conservative also. That listen, this is an all holds barred game, right? Everything goes in getting rid of jihadis. There's not this thing of call it Rahmanis, of compassion. You get them off the street, and you have to be credible in doing it. Secondly, the whole
Are you talking about like the French in the Battle of Algiers?
That's a good point. The French, I think we have to split it there in two. Some of the brutality there was not necessary. You have to know where to draw the line, as you and I both talk about all the time. Get a possible. Where do you draw the line? Okay, you have to know where to draw the line. That you are humane towards the population and towards those who suffered and those who may have even supported them at times, but now says, "Wait a minute, I have if this didn't work," and not, how should I say, show that quote compassion towards those who are with this jihad ideal. So I think the French overdid it, because remember, how did the French lose in Algeria? Their population in France turned against them. All right, because we don't want something like that. That those who are supporting this new body would say, "Wait a minute, you guys are behaving, just as bad as they are." So let's get the civilians out of it, and that those who are Hamas supporters, they're the ones you're going after, and specifically, and everybody knows that you're credible. Secondly, education system has to be changed completely. We know that, but that includes, and I've said it many times, this whole idea of a reverse abrogation, taking the Quran and reinstating positive things about Jews, Christians, and others. There aren't a tremendous amount, there are enough, and beginning the negation of all the jihad issues, except when someone's directly attacked for, let's say, no reason, okay? And that's also a tall order, because you have to eliminate an education system that started in 2007 with the overthrow and went right through to 2023. A whole generation was raised on that, just like America did in West Germany and in Japan. And it took a generation to get it done. But I think there's a chance. We have to take it. That's the discrediting, right? Degrade, destroy, discredit.
Okay, let me throw a spanner into the works of that, and I first of all I thoroughly agree with, once again, with the theory, and I think that the German and Japanese models at least provide a basis. I'm not sure they provide a good analogy, but they at least provide a basis for a case to be made for being able to flip a society. Let's also remember that particularly in Germany, it wasn't so much an issue in Japan. There were some organizations being set up after the German defeat to continue resistance against the Americans. And there were quite a number of cases, although all the information is not out there, but quite a number of cases of German youths, I'm talking about 16, 17, and 18-year-olds, who were captured by the American forces. They were tried for espionage and shot in not small numbers. I mean, we're not talking about massacres and huge numbers, but it wasn't a one-off here and there. And that was part of the iron fist that America used to maintain control over Germany. Japan was kind of different because once the emperor turned, that the society just went with him, and that was the end of it. But in any event, it was total control in both cases. The spanner I want to throw into this one is that once Nazi Germany was destroyed, there were no other real sources of Nazism in the world.
Correct.
And once Imperial Japan was destroyed, well, there was never anything Imperial Japanese out of Imperial Japan. So there were no other, call it well springs, to compete with the American occupation forces in those two countries. Gaza, as we both know, is a tiny area with a small population by Muslim world standards. It's difficult enough to isolate, and the idea would be if it's going to be rebuilt and controlled, it wouldn't be isolated. In other words, I think that part of the Western idea, erroneously, is, well, we'll network them into the rest of the world, and they'll see the beauty of Western liberal democracy and affluence, and we're going to build hotels on the beaches, and life is going to be beautiful. I vaguely remember those dreams after Oslo, and we all remember the casino in Jericho and how well that idea worked out. Everybody's going to make money. Everyone's going to be happy. So the question is how even with your model, and again, I don't have a problem with the model per se, how do you prevent the pervasive, intrusive influence of jihadis from the outside, of which there's no shortage, whether of the Shiite brand or the Sunni brand, and Iran and Turkey come to mind just, right off the top of my head, to say nothing of all sorts of other organizations out there, Muslim Brotherhood, for example, which isn't far away. How do you keep them from setting up and maintaining their own operations in the guise of humanitarian aid, social organizations? We know they've only been doing this for decades. Hamas started that way.
Right. That was Ahmed Yassin. He said, you never jettison social dawah. Okay, or the calling. Okay, so very good.
By the way, as did Amal in Lebanon under Fadlallah.
And as long as they were neutralists, we were okay. And then they shifted when Hezbollah showed up, which is also the problem. They start neutralist and shift. I remember that being in Lebanon. Amal made no troubles for us. Okay, so let me answer. First of all, it's the hinterland issue that we've discussed also at times. That there is a hinterland, not like with Nazi Germany or Japan, there wasn't anybody else out there. Meaning that you have to deal with the broader scope of things. And here, I'll get to it in a second. Let me just talk about shooting those like you spoke about from Nazi Germany. The way I look at it, Israel may make the arrest, but those who will try them and decide what to be done with them and where they'll be sent can be from the Arab world, as far as I'm concerned. Okay? And if they decide that this is an execution, just like it's done with ISIS characters that we know, right, when they're sent to Iraq or Egypt from the jails in Kurdistan, all right, they do with them whatever they want. It's not our problem. So that may be a way of doing it. And we know this has been done before when you sort of export the problem. You get it and you export it, and whatever they do, say, listen, we're not going to judge you by Western law. You never wanted Western law. You don't have it now. Deal with it elsewhere. And hey, as we say, it's your contractor on something. It sounds very not nice, but it'll be understood much better that way because that's what they'll understand. Okay, The hinterland issue. Look, Iran has to be taken out. And here, I don't know if there's going to be a deal because Donald speaks of being the deal maker, right? The Donald, which is all very nice. And I'm sure that things, at least to me, look like they're going to be getting better for Israel, at least in the short run. We don't know.
Yes.
But the Iranian nuclear facilities must be eliminated. Not a deal, because they can always, once you have a deal, someone can always break it. They have to be eliminated. The message has to be driven home. The message has to be driven home to the Houthis, and the message has to be driven home to the Qataris, okay, the Wahhabists.
Yes.
Because the Saudis are apparently moving away from that. We know it. How much they're really moving away, because internally that's been the education system for so long, we don't know. But everybody's got to be put on notice worldwide that the Americans, the West, is not putting up with this. There's a problem with the Europeans of saying we're going to be as determined as the Americans to put an end to this. I would hope that after what's been going on in the West, they would understand this. Now, democracy, forget it. Okay? That was the big mistake, not only with Oslo, and the West is, it's the way they see things, right? Our system is the best system, therefore you'll understand it, and we'll teach it to you, and you'll love it, and it'll all work.
And it's universal.
And it's universal. What we've always called this liberal hubris, everybody thinks like me. It doesn't work here now. I'm not saying it won't work in 50 to 100 years, but not now. Remember, it took the West 350 years or so to go from a feudal system to start moving, and a church-based system, whatever else, to start moving towards democracy. We can't expect the Arab world to do it any faster, right? They were not at that point yet. Also, there are different issues within Islam, what people believe in, that's very hard to separate mosque and state, so to speak. So you have a situation in Gaza where it's not, quote, democratic. You have different family groups there. We call them hamulot, whatever else. You base it on them and those groups getting together and ruling together with, of course, the American or Western, as well as, call it, quote, moderate Arab dictate that this is your mandate and you will do it and you will be rewarded for it. You will be rewarded for it. Okay? The same thing also, by the way, if you look at the West Bank, Judea and Samaria, the same thing. It breaks into 8, 9 different areas there because we know democracy didn't work there either. And you put it to everybody. This is the system. We're not forcing democracy on. We are forcing stability and peace, but on our terms. Not that we call a ceasefire the minute Israel gets slaughtered on October 7th because we need a ceasefire. No. The good guys, all right, I have no problem saying we're the good guys, win. And now we're going to, quote, negotiate on our terms what has to be done. And that's what will be. And you carry the nabut, as we say, carry a big stick. Teddy Roosevelt.
Big stick.
Yeah, Teddy Roosevelt carried a big stick. And yes, there's a carrot there. There's a carrot. Things can get better, but no more jihad. Okay, so I know it's a bit of a stretch, but I don't see where there's any sort of other option. There's got to be a lot of enforcement. And there's got to be an understanding that those who go with this are rewarded and that the society is being rebuilt around understandings that will allow for world pluralism.
Okay, well, we have 5 weeks ahead of us of this round of the ceasefire exchange agreement. We've seen Hamas already stretching the limits, whether it was with the delay in handing the names of the first group. They've already announced that the release of the second group will be a day later than what's agreed upon. I think you'll agree that we're going to be seeing all sorts of tricks and maneuvers like that to test the limits of how far we will tolerate their, let's say, deviation from the agreement before we call it a violation.
Right.
And I think we'll check in again in a couple of weeks, 3 weeks, and sort of look back on the period and assess on that. So, any conclusion you would like to add before we sign off? Okay,
just one small thing. Even the smallest violations, you hit them hard. And ignore anybody that calls it excessive force. Excessive force, the only way you win. You hit them hard the way we did when they started with the big delays, or like in Lebanon, 24 hours, wasn't taken care of. We're taking it out. And they know small violations, you will be punished so many times over beyond what's considered to be reasonable, okay? But it's our reasonability, and therefore don't do it, right? And that's the only way to enforce, and they have to get used to that. And I think that'll be very good as precedent when we, how should we say, the West should get a grip on this. It'll be very good precedent to saying, listen, nobody veers beyond the straight and narrow. Okay?
It'll be interesting as usual.
Yes, it will be. And thank you very much. And
thank you. Thanks for joining us, Yisrael. Yisrael Ne'eman, director of the Ne'eman Academy, author of Hamas Jihad, and by the way, a good friend and colleague. So once again, thanks for being with us. To our listeners, stay well, stay safe, stay engaged. Bye for now.
Bye. Thank you very much.
Thank you for listening to Conflict Uncovered. As always, it's been another rough day in the Middle East. We hope you found this episode insightful and engaging. If you enjoyed this episode, please subscribe, share and recommend with your friends, and review our podcast on your favorite platform. For more in-depth analysis and exclusive content, join our community and follow us on social media. Stay tuned for our next episode as we continue to explore the critical issues shaping the Middle East and the world. Until next time, stay informed and stay safe.